Okay, and now let us discuss the Korean economic growth and development. Before we start the discussion about the Korean economic development, let me share the sad and shameful Korea in the 1950s. The GNP per capita in 1953 was only $67. When the Korean War ended, and 58% of the Korean budget subsidized by foreign sources in 1953, and also the Korea was the predominantly agricultural. 44% of the GNP came from agriculture, and mostly semi-subsistence on plus of the 1 hectare. And there were 32,000 villages. 40% were not accessible by trucks, and 80% of the farmhouses had thatched roofs, and only 20% had access to electricity, and about 22% of Korea was under cultivation. 75% of Korea mountain areas, and also nearly 50% of the mountains were treeless in late 1950s. No, this is very shameful one. The parasite infection rate 1969 is 77%. But if you take a look at the 1950s, this percentage is almost 100%. So almost all Koreans had at least one parasite in their body. The parasites are taking away the nutrition from the body. So Koreans were really skinny and unhealthy at the time. Okay, this is how we recorded economic growth. First of all, in 1961, the income was $92. In 2011, more than $22,000. We recorded the increase of the income around the 1975. The income became higher than $1,000. And then in 1996, when we became the member of the OECD, the income was more than $12,000. But right after the 1996, we experienced the crisis. So we had turned to the IMF for research emergency fund. But we recovered in 3 and 4 years, and then we recorded more than 22,000. But here, 2007 and 2008 and 2009, we also had the same, the global financial crisis, impact of the global financial crisis. And also, we had the foreign aid up to 1982, and also from 1960 to 1996, we had 7 5-year economic plans, economic development plans. And that also we recorded the big increase in the trade volume. Okay. Now Korea is 11th largest trading country. And let me divide the Korean economic growth into 3 periods. Number 1 is from 1961 to 1979, under the leadership by the President Park Chung-hee, and trials and adjustment from 1980 to 1997. We had the failure of the heavy and chemical industries in the early 1980s, and we had the Seoul Olympic Game in 1988. Around the 1990, we have some confidence, so we turn in to host the Seoul Olympic Games. and we became member of the OECD in 1996, and we had the financial crisis in 1997. Ripening and globalization from 1999 to present, we had the crisis from 1997 to 2000, and we also hosted the World Cup game in 2002, and we became member of the OECD DAC in 2010. You know, this is DAC means Development Assistance Committee. We became the full-fledged member of the OECD by giving and the foreign aid to foreign countries. Actually, we gave the foreign aid from around the 1980s, but we got the full membership of the OECD DAC in 2010, and we already settled the free trade agreement with the United States and EU. And when we started the industrialization in 1960s, Korea was one of the poorest nations on the earth. As the President Barack Obama said, our income per capita income was $92. Even our income was that low, and one of the poorest nation on the earth, we had a mindset that we try to beat the #1 economy on the earth and #2 economy on the earth at the time. You know, we had that mindset, but you know, foreigners at the time possibly scoffed at us and laughed at us, since one of the poorest nation on the earth tried to beat the #1 and #2 economy. But we sent people and the students to United States and to Japan to learn from them. Okay, this is very important. We try to see and watch and learn from the world best practice, knowledge, technology, market, human resources, and growth model, and production skills, and other things. And also, we had fortunately 2 external sources of the boom. In Vietnam, we sent to construction companies. There was a huge demand from the Vietnam, and also when the oil price hike in 1970s, we sent construction companies to the Middle East to earn the oil money from the OPEC member countries. And also, when we started the industrialization, China suffered the cultural revolutions, disorder and conflict in China. So the Chinese industrialization was delayed because of the cultural revolutions. If China had started the industrialization, probably Korea is in very difficult condition these days. And also, we successfully rided on the liberalization and globalization and digitalization from 1980s. As I told you before, we hosted the Seoul Olympic Games and the World Cup game. And also, this is, I think, very important. I told you that we had a crisis in 1997 to 2000. But at the time, the world economy, the major world economies, US and Japan and European nations were in boom. So we could easily restore from the crisis, since our major export markets were strong at the time. But, you know, I told you that the world suffered from the global financial crisis from 2007. Take a look at several European nations, including Greece and Italy, Spain, Portugal, Iceland, Ireland. They are taking more years and still there is no evidence that they are recovering from the financial crisis, since the major world economies, US, Japan, Europeans are suffering from recessions too. Even though there are small symptoms of the recovery, but still most of the world economies are suffering, so European nations, they are having big trouble these days. Let me start with the role of the Korean government in the Korean economic growth and development. You know, the Korean government, the Korean government was leading the economic growth. Under the leadership of the president had the office of the president and also economic ministries. President pushed the ministers and the high government officials to help and support the Korean business and the entrepreneurs, and the Korean government ministries made financial support and tax support and marketing support for the entrepreneurs. And also Korean entrepreneurs, they had very strong entrepreneurship, and also we had diligent workers, and they had aggressive and active overseas marketing. Because of that, the export promotion support high growth. Export growth of 40% per annum in 1964 to 1980. And after that, we also had the strong leadership of the president and the ministries, and we had the very hectic and aggressive and strong entrepreneurs combined with the workers. And the Korean government made 7 5-year economic and social development plans. You know, when you start the first 5-year development plans, we focused on electricity, coal energy intensive society, and SOC development, and agricultural productivity. You know, at the time, Korea was majorly the agricultural economy, but we put the basis of the industrialization in the first 5-year development plan. And second 5-year plan and other following plans, we measured the problems and we made the plans to push our economy from the agricultural economy to the industrialized economy. And also if we take a look at those 7 plans, the timing and the measures were really excellent. Okay. And also in the economics textbook, the authors of the Economics of Development, Todaro and Smith, they pointed out that there were at least 19 export-oriented industrial policy interventions by the Korean government. Currency undervaluations and accelerated depreciation and subsidized interest rate and preferential credits for export and preferential access to the imported intermediate inputs and targeted infant industry protections and tax exemptions for export. And those measures were really timely and effective in boosting the industrialization and Korean export. And also, this is one example that how the Korean government overcome the difficulties and crisis. As you know, we had the old price hike from $3.5 to $14 per barrel in 1973 to 1974. At the time, Korea suffered from current account deficit of $1.7 billion. So the Korean national budget was near to bankruptcy. At the time, the President Park sent a delegation to the Middle East and ordered the construction companies to go there in 1974 to earn the oil money from the Middle East countries. Government coordinated to exclude the dumpings in the bid and supervised to secure quality in construction, and also the construction workers received the exemption of the military service and high salary and honor. So based on those efforts, the total value of overseas orders in construction 1974, it was only $260 million, but in 1980 it became $8.2 billion, huge increase in the total value of the overseas orders in construction. And that money was really useful for recovering from the crisis. And also, Koreans had a mindset full of the can-do spirit. Even though Korea was one of the poorest nations on the earth, as I told you before, we support the colonialism by the Japanese. So we had the mindset, whatever we do, we have to win over Japanese. Even in sports games, the soccer team, the Korean national soccer team may lose games to other countries, but at least we have to win over Japanese. In other basketball and volleyball, we may lose to other countries, but we have to win over Japanese. And also, I told you that we had a war from 1950 to 1953, so we had a rivalry. And also, you know that Vietnam was unified by the North Vietnam, at the time the communist country. So we are suffered from, we feared the unification by the North Korea. So we tried to win over North Korea. And also, we had pioneering entrepreneurs. They made something out of the nothing. Even though they made several failures, but they did not stop. So currently, the Hyundai heavy industry is the largest producer of the cargo ship, and also Samsung, the largest seller of the smartphones, and Doosan, it has the largest desalination plant on the earth. And also, we had the enthusiastic parents. They sacrificed for the education of their children. Korean parents, they did not stop. They did not stop to use all the money in order to educate the children. And sometimes, some parents, they did not leave any coins for themselves in order to educate their children. And the result, 90-80% of students with high school credentials. And also, Korea really excessively performance driven. And also, we have the relatively high quality college graduates. Only 10% of the graduates can find jobs in government, in public enterprises in 1960s. But they became reserve army for industrialization in 1970s and 1980s. Because of the quality educations, even though they could not find the jobs, those graduates became the reserve army for industrialization in 1970s and 1980s. And also, where the compassionate workers, they had the mindset, go and work anywhere on the earth. So they did extreme challenges to the Saharan desert and tropical areas and Siberia. Very cold place. In winter, minus 40 degrees, minus 70 degrees. In Saharan desert, 60 and 70 degrees in summer. Tropical areas, poisonous insects, but they did not stop. For example, from 1963 to 1978, we sent 7,800 workers to German mines. You know, at the time, the German miners, they did not want to work in the German mines. But Korean miners, mostly the college graduates, went to German mines 1,000 meter and 3,000 meter under the earth. And also we sent more than 10,000 nurses to the German hospitals. At the time, German nurses, they didn't want at the night time. And also they didn't want to do the dirty things. But the Korean nurses, they worked in the night, and also they did the dirty things. And also in 1974, we sent construction workers to the desert area in the Middle East to earn oil money and to fight against while fighting against poisonous spiders and scorpions and deadly desert storms. Currently, Korea is recording the longest work hours per year in OECD member countries. Korea now is 14th largest economy on the earth and 9th largest among OECD members. You know, there are other countries like Russia and China. They are very large economy, but Korea is 9th largest among the OECD members. And also, Korea is recording 11th biggest trade volumes and 9th biggest export volumes. Take a look at the export volumes. 1946, only $1 million US dollars, and 1964, $100 million. Still very small amount. But 2011, it is 556 billion US dollars. And also, we record the stronger competitiveness in terms of credit rating than the Japanese. For the first time after the Second World War, Korea became the record higher credit ratings than Japan in 2012 in all three major credit rating companies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch. Okay. And let's take a look at some of the statistics here. Currently, Korea's foreign exchange reserve is 6th largest on the earth, shipbuilding number 1 on the earth, steel number 6 on the earth, car production number 5 on the earth, industrial robots number 4 on the earth, and trade volume 11th largest, oil import number 4, petrochemical products number 5, cell phone number 1, and number of high-speed internet and number 9. But the percentage of the high-speed internet is number 1 on the earth. And take a look at this. The private education expenditure and number 1 on the earth. Korean parents are spending lots of money for educating their children, even after the public schools and private schools in the daytime. They are sending their children the private academy in the evening. And also, this is the student in US is number 3 on the earth. Take a look at this number. From 2012 to 2013, China had more than 235,000 Chinese students in United States. India, 96,000. Korea, 70,000. But the population of China is more than 1.3 billion. India, more than 1.1 billion. Korea, only 50 million. But number 3 on the earth. So Koreans are spending lots of money for education and pushing their children to study more in United States. You know, Korea export product, ship, petrochemicals, and wireless communication machineries, and imports crude oil, semiconductors, natural gases. And the 5 largest export market of Korea in 1995, it was United States, Japan, and Hong Kong. In 2009, China, US, and Japan. So we have very strong relations with China and United States and Japan. And this is the change in the structure in export. In early 60s, the heavy and chemical industry products were very small amount, and the share also was very low. But now, most of the products are heavy and chemical industry products, and light industry product is only 9.3%. Agricultural product is only 1.1% of the total export. And the change in industry, this is the agriculture, and this is the industry, and this is the service industry. Nowadays, Korea is focusing on the development of the service industry. And I told you that Korea recorded the miraculous economic growth, but in Korean economic growth, the Gini coefficient, which shows the income distribution, was quite stable. So this number 0.3 is very good if we compare other countries. And the lower Gini coefficient, the more equal in income. So this is very good. And if the Gini coefficient is greater than 0.5, social stability is threatened. And you know, if you take a look at, compare the East Asian countries with the Latin American countries, Latin American countries' Gini coefficient is very high, more than 0.5. But East Asian countries are recording very stable and low Gini coefficient. So even the Korea recorded very fast economic growth, the Gini coefficient showed very stable. So we can say that we maintained very stable and fair income distributions.